Hello. I'm laughing because I've already hit and stopped the record button like 4 times, all within the first 5 seconds of actually hitting the record button because something just my tongue got tied and went anywhere. So I'm hoping I can just like let it flow and move past, move past all that and keep recording this time, regardless of what flirty jubbit comes out of my mouth, because I'm sure it will happen. Today's episode is inspired by a question I got in an imposter syndrome speaking engagement that I did a few weeks ago. So just a little bit of backup or a little bit of background. This engagement was, I think we had about 230 people on it. It was one company and it was through the Young Professionals Network, but the invite went out to the entire company. It was like a really good cross section of people at different points in their careers, different genders, all sorts of different things. And it was really cool actually, because this company only had about 800 people total and like 230 showed up for this session, which is amazing. Like that is amazing. And I think just shows partly how engaged their workforce is in these types of events, which is amazing to see. And also just how many people identify with experiencing that doubt and that imposter syndrome and that you don't know enough even when you do, or you feel like you just got lucky or don't deserve to be in the place where you are. You're just fooling everyone for being there. And so, yeah, I was doing this imposter syndrome session. And in it, I talk about how, at least 70% of people experience imposter syndrome. And that number is low. Like I've seen as high as 80 or 90%. Not that 80% of people experience it every single day of their whole life and career, but that it comes and goes, or that you experience it at certain points or in certain situations or around certain people. So, we're going through the whole session, which is like, what is imposter syndrome? When does it show up? Why do you experience it? And what are the tools that you can use for yourself and then also for others to help others through imposter syndrome? So both help yourself when those doubting feelings arise, when those imposter inner critic thoughts arise, and what can you do for others one-on-one, and to break down some of the structural reasons like bias and discrimination that contribute to imposter syndrome in the first place. So typically when I do a session like this, we almost always have Q&A, and typically people are asking questions to dive a little deeper into imposter syndrome, or, want to get some further thoughts on what to do in a certain situation when it is showing up for them. But this session, I got a really fascinating question that I loved. And this is what it was. What if you feel guilty for not feeling like an imposter? So essentially, what if you don't feel guilty for like not experiencing imposter syndrome at all? Which is so fascinating. And this was an anonymous question in the chat in the Q&A because it was a virtual session. So I couldn't like ask this person to unmute and share more, or to, raise their hand if we were in a room and kind of expound on what they meant by that. But my immediate thought went to like, oh yeah, here are all the reasons why it's hard to own how amazing you are, to own your strengths and to own your awesome and to own your confidence, and not be like, oh wait, but I feel like an imposter. I feel broken. I don't feel confident, which is hard also. Don't get me wrong. It's like the opposite side of the hard. Like you don't feel like an imposter. You feel super confident and you're like, I know I'm good at this. Like, I know I have something to offer here. I know how to stand tall in this meeting. I know how to use my voice. I know where to use my strengths. And I know that I can create an impact. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it in whatever way that looks like for you. And that can be so hard. And it can actually make you feel guilty, because it's like, wait, should I be feeling doubt? Should I be feeling less confident? Partly in comparison to other people who are, in this point, all sharing in the chat the doubts and insecurities and imposter thoughts and feelings they've had, which are totally normal. Like I said, 70, 80, 90% of people experience them. And it's also completely okay if you're like, no, I'm actually like, I'm really solid. Like I'm glad I'm here learning about this imposter syndrome and I don't feel it. And that's okay too. And it's so fascinating to me that there can be this guilt of really owning your strengths owning what makes you awesome, owning what makes you amazing, owning all of your radiance. And it's fascinating. And also it totally makes sense. And I have felt this very deeply, which is maybe part of the reason that my brain automatically went there when I saw this question of like, oh yeah, you feel guilty. And it's like hard to step into your strengths and confidence, even though you feel it, even though you feel like deep in your knowing, like, yeah, I've got this. But you feel like you should be feeling doubt. You feel like you should be feeling imposter syndrome, even though you're like, yeah, but I'm good. I've got these strengths. I know how to use them. I feel confident. And there's some really good reasons that you feel this way. And I think they can be different for every person, but I want to hit on a couple that like I know have come up for me, where they've shown up and what you can do about it. And it's a process. Like, I want to be real clear. This is something that I have been working on for years. I didn't really feel it that much in my corporate career. My corporate career, I doubted sometimes, often, I would say actually, how to present myself, because I've talked a little bit about on this podcast, like I got feedback that I was direct, but I really wanted to use my voice, but I didn't want to get criticized for being direct. I didn't want to get that feedback. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So that was very real for me in my corporate career, but I wouldn't say I don't remember ever feeling imposter syndrome in my corporate career. I don't really ever feel like doubting my skills. I don't feel like I don't remember doubting my skills, except for in a couple situations when I legitimately was pretty in over my head and was like, whoo, I got a lot to learn here. Maybe more than is possible to learn in the short amount of time that I need to learn it. So there was a few times when even looking back, I'm like, that wasn't imposter syndrome, Heather. You really just didn't know a lot in that situation. So I didn't really experience this imposter syndrome or this doubting, my skills or anything like that in my corporate career. I was pretty confident and I felt okay about that. And it was also hard to step into it. And then when I hit my entrepreneurship, like both of those, they raised the ante on both of those, which is so interesting to me. Like I experienced more imposter syndrome, which makes sense because I was putting myself out there as an expert, as a speaker, being on stage, coaching other people. Like you have to do that, whatever your expertise is that you are selling, whatever your product is that you are selling as an entrepreneur, you have to own it. So putting yourself out there, like I experienced more imposter syndrome of like, do I know enough to own it? Do I know enough? Did I just get lucky? Should I have to overwork to prove that I know enough and that I do belong here? So like the imposter syndrome ante raised, and also the discomfort of owning my strengths and owning what I knew I was good at, owning what I knew I was good at. And it's an interesting combination. And I think they probably go hand in hand for a lot of people because of some of these cultural reasons, the experiences that I've had, that you've had, that make it hard to own your strengths. It's almost like those experiences incite the imposter syndrome or make you feel guilty for not feeling like an imposter. Because I will tell you, like my gut has known for years, I would say, probably longer. It's had an inkling for way longer than what I've been doing it, but it knew immediately when I started speaking, like, oh, there's something here. Like, yes, I had just started. I had a lot of room to improve. I'm always improving. Like I think of my speaking has gotten so much better in the last several years as I've done it more and more. I know how to connect better with people. I know what resonates. I know what doesn't. And it's always evolving too. So I'm always learning. And I knew right away that this was something I was good at. And this was something that I was able to create an environment where people showed up and shared themselves and shared openly. And that's so important to me, whether it's in a one-on-one conversation or a coaching call or a speaking engagement with like 1,000 people, is that I want people to feel seen and heard and like they can tell the truth about who they are and their experiences and know that they're not alone and know that their experiences are normal and that there are tools that we can use to reconnect into ourselves, into our authenticity, to break those rules that you've been given and come back into yourself separate from those rules. And I knew right away that there was something here. And it was both, I both felt that imposter syndrome of like, do I know enough to do this? And the just weirdness of knowing that I was good at this and that this was the path to pursue and that this was where I was going to create impact with my life and with my work through my writing, through my speaking, and like stepping out into that. So there's several reasons why this can be hard, why it can be hard to own what makes you so amazing. The first one is the one that I've kind of been hinting about, but I didn't say it directly, which is this fear of arrogance. So I have this fear of arrogance of like, I both want to own what I'm good at, but I don't want to portray that I have it all figured out or that I know all the answers, because I don't. I mean, that's the reality is I don't. But when you get on stage, when I get on stage and I need to portray myself as having value, but without having all of the answers. And I believe that I have value. And I also know that I don't have every single answer. And I would never tell someone, here is the exact right thing that you need to do for your life, for your work. Here's the right decision. Like, no, I can't tell someone that. Only you can tell you what that right decision is. And so I was worried about this, like, what if I'm, bleeding over into this area of arrogance, cockiness, of like portraying that I have it all figured out and I'm like above the people in the audience. So this fear of arrogance has been really big for me. And it's something that I work on all the time, because I also know that stepping in to that arrogance or that feeling of arrogance, that's not actually real. I mean, the feeling is real, but not the actual arrogance. I'm pretty sure it's not real. Excuse me. That is, I got to take a sip of water. That is my work. That is my work for right now. And it's intertwined in the second piece that I'm going to talk about, the second reason, which is cultural. So depending on the culture that you grew up in, I think this varies a lot. But that is that essentially, like, if you are sharing your strengths, it's bragging. And bragging is bad. This, like, you're too big for your britches. You shouldn't put yourself out there and like tell people what you're good at, because that's bragging. I know I grew up in Minnesota and no one really said those words directly, at least not to me. I think they do get said directly in some cultures, but there was definitely an undercurrent of this like Midwestern humility that I think hit all genders, probably women a little bit more, but I do think it was like a cultural undercurrent in general of like, okay, don't make yourself bigger than you are, which in reality just stops you from being as big as you are, not being bigger than you are. It has a lot of unintended consequences of making you feel like you need to shrink or not put yourself out there because you don't want to break that cultural rule of humility. And when in reality, some humility is good. And also, like, you're allowed to own exactly what makes you as big as you are and what makes you as awesome as you are. So those are two of the reasons. And then the third one is around the gender piece of this, which is that there are women, I've seen it. I don't know if I've experienced it super directly, but I've definitely seen it very directly, that women who step into their strengths, who step into exactly what makes them awesome, and they know it, and they just have this confidence and this air, like, there are a lot of people who admire that and they get judged for it. Not by everyone, but that judgment is there. It's kind of this like, who does she think she is? Who does she think she is speaking up, walking through the world with this like body confidence? Who does she think she is to do that? And I think like when I've seen that as I've even felt that a little bit with other women where I'm like, oh, wait, gosh, I'm like both admiring and having a little bit of the, who does she think she is? And for me, I can tell you whenever I get that, who does she think she is? Really, jealousy is the underlying emotion that's there, because I also want to be, sometimes am, and want to be more, that woman who is walking through the world with this, like, I've got this and I know myself. I am grounded in my power. I've come a long ways in that category. And I know there's still a lot more that I can work on to deepen all of that. And at the same time, when you've seen that judgment happen, when you have seen other women being judged for owning and being confident and putting themselves out there and letting themselves be just as big as they are and take up all that space, if you have seen them be judged directly or indirectly as a kid in your workplace, in other situations, then you might shy away from that because you don't want to be judged. You don't want to be the person that other people are saying, like, who does she think she is? Or God, she's a little direct. She's a little aggressive. She's putting herself out there a lot. Like, does she think she's a little bigger than she is? Does she think she's a little bit better than she actually is? When in reality, she's just owning who she is. But when you see that judgment, you might shy away from your own strengths, your own radiance, in an effort to avoid that judgment. And that's very gender-based. It means, again, some of these are cultural and impact everyone, but that last one that I'm talking about is for sure. Like, women experience that more because we've been given that rule around likability and, not owning all of you are. Like, it does make people uncomfortable. It does make people uncomfortable to see a woman owning exactly who she is and putting herself out there into the world. And it's also pretty amazing and pretty admirable, and how we're going to create change. So this is some of those reasons that it can be hard. And like I said, this is an area that I am working on. It's an area that I am leaning into consistently, and the discomfort is there. And it's interesting, in my next book, I have this chapter in the book that's kind of like a before and after. There's 4 different stories in this chapter. That the before is when I'm following all of the rules, before I recognized that those rules existed. So some of them are around overachieving and overdoing rules, connecting that worth to my productivity. But then others are related to my body and to dating and how I showed up in those situations because I had this shame in my body and my lack of relationship experience and how I showed up there. So like these stories, and then work and my voice. So these stories are like this before and after. And I realized that I was just as uncomfortable with all of you reading these stories of my after. So my after was essentially when I've recognized those rules, when I've broken them, and I've stepped in to my own radiance and really believed in it, believed in my own power, my own freedom, my own confidence, my own strengths, all of my own voice. Like when I have broken those old rules that kept me smaller than I was and stepped into the fullness of who I am. And I was just as uncomfortable with you reading all these stories of the after, of the owning my strengths and radiance, as I was with all of these vulnerable pieces in the book about like how I felt broken and where that came from, and the performing and the shame. Like that feels vulnerable also. And so does the part around owning all of the after, all of the glory, all the radiance, all the strengths, all the confidence, all the space, and owning that. So this is something that I am working on as I think about more and more people reading this book, which, is the goal. It's one of the goals. I always write books, partly really any writing, partly for myself and my own journey. But of course, like I want other people to read it and take away what you need to take away from it. At this point, only about 15 people have read the book. And every single time I send it out, I get a little twinge of that vulnerability. And it's partly the stories of the hard stories of the brokenness, and partly it's the stories of healing and strength and glory and radiance. The vulnerability is there for both. So it's something that I am working on. And a couple of things have really helped me, and also with other women that I've worked with and conversations I've had with friends. So I want to share those with you today, because these things have been so helpful for me, because I think without these things, that discomfort might have stopped me. I'd have to think about that. But I think that discomfort with the vulnerability of sharing all of who I am, owning my space and my strengths, it would have stopped me more than I would like to admit without doing these things. So one, the biggest thing for me that I do over and over and over again is remind myself of what is more important. So what is more important than the discomfort that I'm feeling? And that's something I share in my imposter syndrome sessions as well. So it can be, you can use this for discomfort, for fear, for doubt, for imposter syndrome, anything. Just getting clear on what is more important to you than those feelings of being an imposter, than the discomfort of owning your strengths, of stepping into yourself, than those feelings of doubt, those feelings of fear, because all the good things in life are probably going to bring on some of those emotions. So what is bigger or more important than that to you? And then let yourself be pulled forward by the thing that is bigger, by the thing that's bigger. And so like when I think about this book that like my why is so big. My why is so big because my life is so different after I have recognized these rules and really broken them down and let go of the shame that they caused. The freedom that I experience now personally is incredible. And clearly I'm still working on things because I'm sitting here talking to you about all that. And it's so different. And I've realized that a lot of the emotions that I had, a lot of these feelings of brokenness that I had nothing to do with me. They had nothing to do with me. And recognizing that allowed me to like own what I needed to own and also let go of the pieces that were never mine to begin with. Let go of the pieces that were structural and cultural and based in bias about how woman is and is not supposed to show up in the world and how body's supposed to show up and all of these things. Like the last episode was on those 3 lies that women are told about your worth. So if you're curious, if you didn't listen to that, go back and listen to that because that that gets to the heart of a lot of this as well. So reminding myself of what is more important that for this book is that I want you to also see and feel and read those messages and know that you are also not broken. And there's a greater freedom and joy and impact on the other side for you as an individual and all of us collectively. That's a pretty big why. And that why is bigger than any personal discomfort. Doesn't mean the discomfort goes away, but I'm motivated by what is bigger. And that's what drives me forward. And your why can be big like that. It can be based on certain times of your life. It can be around other, what you want, the example you want to set for other people, a million different things. There's no right or wrong to what your why is, what your missions, what is bigger than you, bigger than for you than the discomfort of stepping into your strengths. So that's one. The other thing that was really, really insightful for me is I was working with a coach last summer, fall. Isis Lior is her name. She's amazing. And we were talking about this like fear of arrogance that I have that's been pretty pervasive since I started becoming an entrepreneur and a speaker and putting myself out there in more public ways. And like portraying myself as this expert and that I value to add, which I believe. And again, this fear of arrogance drops in. And really what we talked about, we identified was part of this fear of arrogance is because so many examples in our culture of power are of arrogance and are of power over rather than power with. And I never want to be a leader. I never want to be a person that has power over other people. I always want to be in power with. So we're sharing value. We're learning from each other. And yes, I can get up on a stage and I can guide an audience and I can share my knowledge and I can help to create an environment. And I'm not lording that power over you. I'm not telling you what to do in your career and your life. It's more that I'm creating this environment where we can all learn together. And she, in our discussion there, we were with this realization of like, I don't want to portray power over. She's like, well, who are some examples of people that you know, either personally or kind of larger figures that we would all know that really are this power with? So people who step into their strengths and who are powerful, but not in a toxic way. So they're powerful with power with and not power over. And Michelle Obama was the immediate person that came into my mind of like, she is powerful. She knows exactly who she is. You get this eminence of strength and confidence from her, but she's not lording that power over anyone. She's working with people. You can feel her energy. And I remember when she did her Becoming tour. So she wrote the book Becoming, her memoir Becoming, and then she did that tour. I paid more to go see her than I think I've ever paid to see anyone else, like any concert, any other person. She and Brene Brown, I also paid a lot to see Brene Brown the year I lived in Australia. So they might have been kind of like right at the center. Brene Brown's another good example of this, but Michelle Obama. And the reason I paid so much, because this was in Minnesota at the XL Center. It was a huge arena. I could have paid less, but I wanted to be close enough to the front to feel her presence, because I wanted to feel that power that she had, this healthy, beautiful, confident power. I wanted to be in that presence. And I was, and it was totally worth it. And then after I heard her, thought of her name, other people came to mind as well in different walks of life. So like Maya Angelou came to me, and I remember seeing her on stage, and she was just so confident and so knew exactly who she was. But again, in this really healthy, beautiful power with kind of way. And then Brandi Carlile came to my mind. She's probably my favorite active, current musician. Her and Joni Mitchell will be the other one. Joni Mitchell and Brandi Carlile, my two top favorites. And Brandi Carlile also, in a totally different way, like she's creative, she's a musician, but she's also using her power for good, to raise awareness around issues, particularly around, gender and sexuality and that whole piece. And also like for other musicians, like she's brought other people up around with her, and she tells the truth in her songs. So she's owning the strength, and like you see her on stage and it's like, she knows that she's good at this. She knows that she is owning that. And I'm sure she has experienced doubt, but she knows. Or I think about the Lizzo documentary that I think was on HBO Max, I think. I saw it at someone else's house because I don't have that, that channel. But I remember her saying in there, like, she felt like this was all inevitable. And she worked a really long time. She worked a long, hard time without the fame, without the huge success. And she felt like this was inevitable eventually. And I love that, because that's like just this is exactly what I'm talking about, this stepping into your strengths and stepping into this new definition of power and showing that to other people. And like, we all can be a part of that. So it was this huge mindset flip for me of like, oh, wait, it's not arrogant to step into my strengths. It is actually an honor. It is an honor because I get to be a part of creating this new definition of power with as opposed to power over, of confidence and owning my value and owning my radiance and owning my strengths without lording that over anyone, and just knowing who I am. And you can be a part of that too. You don't have to be on a stage in order to do that. You get to be a definition of healthy power, healthy strength every single day in every interaction that you have. Then there's the final one that I do all the time that has been so helpful for me, which is to have a community, to have other, particularly women friends, although I don't think it has to only be women, but particularly to have women friends who encourage me to step into my radiance, who don't like want me to tone my light down, but who instead shine a light brighter on me. They're like, yeah, bring it more. like bring it more. And I have friends, some of whom are entrepreneurs, some of whom are in corporate careers, some of whom are in healthcare. And like, we do this for each other. And it's not a written down thing, but I can tell you, I have many friends that when I am feeling some doubt, or even if I'm not, and I get around them, I'm just reminded. I am reminded that this is good, that this is okay, that this is wonderful to step into my power, to step into my strength. I don't have to feel guilty about that. I don't need to feel arrogant because this is living my truth. And this is where I'm going to create the most impact. So having those people in your life, even that's just one person. And if you don't have anyone like in your actual life right now, listen to podcasts or read books that remind you of that. And then look for those people in your life, colleagues, friends, family members, even groups that you go to. Like I've been to some events with people, for 2 hours that they aren't people that are my friends, but the environment of that group, the environment of that event had the same impact on me, of reminding me of my own strength and to step into it, to show it to others. No guilt, no need for feeling arrogant, just to recenter in my strength and who I am. So this is what's worked for me. And it will continue to be a journey. Absolutely continue to be a journey of leaning into that discomfort, of knowing what is bigger, reminding myself that I and you and we all get to be this healthy example of power and confidence and strength and truth, and getting around the people who remind you of that. Because the bottom line around this is you stepping into your strengths is just you living your truth. You are allowed to take up the fullness of what you know you are good at, of your radiance, of your light, of your energy, of the space that you have been given. This is where you're going to create the most impact. And this is also where you are going to experience freedom, even if there's also discomfort there at the same time, because this is what it means to be living in your truth. And isn't that what we all want and need? Isn't that what freedom really is living into your truth, living into the greatness that you are. So I would love to continue this conversation. I keep mentioning it because I'm very excited about it, but the pre-sale of my book is starting May 1st. So I'll put a link in the show notes to join my email list, and we'll also give you the ultimate guide to saying no, which is a place that you can step into your strength and set boundaries and say no. So I'll put that link in the show notes, and then you'll get that guide, but also be the first to know about all the things happening with the pre-sale of my book. I'll also put a link in the show notes if you want to learn more about hiring me as a speaker on imposter syndrome, or the other one that's really about owning your strengths is discover your authentic voice and how to use it to create change, because it's about leaning into that true authentic voice that you have and then using it for both your own freedom to advocate for yourself and to create collective change. So we'll put links to all those in the show notes, and yeah, you get to own it. You don't have to feel guilty for not feeling like an imposter, or feel guilty for stepping into exactly who you are. That's just your truth, and you get to live it. End of story.